For over 4 decades, a single question has echoed through the corridors of Hollywood, a whisper carried in hushed documentaries, buried deep within police files, and confessed in sleepless interviews. At the very heart of this enduring mystery stands Robert Wagner, a man once celebrated for his effortless charm, now defined by something far darker. He became a living enigma, a husband caught in a tragic triangle of love, guilt, and unending suspicion. Now, at the age of 95, the relentless passage of time has peeled back the veneer of stardom, leaving only the stark silhouette of the truth, a truth he has shouldered in silence since that fateful, freezing night in 1981. The night a legend was lost, and a legacy was forever altered. It was Thanksgiving weekend, November 28, 1981, and Hollywood's reigning golden couple, Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner, embarked on their yacht, the Splendor, for what they believed would be a tranquil escape off the coast of Catalina Island. They were not alone. Joining them was Natalie's co-star from the film Time's Brainstorm *, a young Christopher Walken, and the vessel's captain, Dennis Davern. For Natalie, this was meant to be a brief sanctuary, a moment of peace away from the relentless glare of the studio lights. But it would become the night that would cast a shadow over the remainder of Robert Wagner's life. The afternoon, however, began with an illusion of peace. Champagne glasses clinked, laughter echoed across the deck. They posed for photographs, capturing smiles that would soon become haunting artifacts. Later, at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant, locals remembered seeing the famous trio, seemingly toasting to their friendship. But as the wine flowed, something else began to surface, a current of tension, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Christopher Walken would later recount how the conversation drifted to Natalie's career, to her burning ambition to reclaim her place in serious, dramatic roles. And with that, Robert Wagner's simmering jealousy began to boil over. Tension had been brewing. He confessed years later in his 2008 memoir, Pieces of My Heart, and jealousy, he wrote, got the best of me. By the time they returned to the Splendor, around 10 o'clock that night, the mood had irrevocably changed. Captain Davern would remember the silence. The easy laughter from earlier was gone, swallowed by tense whispers and the vast, quiet darkness of the ocean. Before long, that quiet erupted into rage. Davern testified that Wagner, in a fury, shattered a wine bottle on the table, the sound of splintering glass ripping through the cabin as he turned his anger on Natalie. He hurled accusations at her, his words laced with venom, convinced she was encouraging Walken. The voice, known for its smooth, composed tone, was now trembling, fractured by rage. Walken attempted to intervene, to calm the storm, but ultimately withdrew to the sanctuary of his own cabin, and then, moments later, a chilling silence fell over the yacht. In that quiet, Natalie Wood had vanished. Wagner's official story was that he simply assumed she had retired for the night, only noticing her absence sometime later. Another detail emerged from the darkness. The Splendor's dinghy, a small inflatable boat they used to travel to and from the shore, was also gone. But this detail clashed with a fundamental truth about Natalie Wood. She was deeply, pathologically afraid of dark water. The notion that she would venture out alone in the dinghy, in nothing but a nightgown, defied everything her friends and family knew about her. It wasn't until 3 in the morning that Wagner finally contacted the Coast Guard. For hours, searchlights cut through the black, churning waves. As the first cold light of dawn broke on November 29th, a horrific discovery was made. The search was over. Natalie's body had been found, floating face down in the water. She was just a mile from the yacht. She was only 43 years old. She was dressed in a flimsy nightgown, a pair of socks, and a bright red down jacket. It was an outfit wholly inadequate for the biting cold of the open sea. The coroner's initial ruling was accidental drowning, but the evidence on her body told a different, more violent story. Bruises that patterned her arms and legs, a fresh abrasion on her cheek, and that one undeniable fact, her profound, lifelong terror of the very water that claimed her. In public, Hollywood mourned in stunned silence, but behind closed doors, the whispers began, and they all formed the same 3 words: jealousy, rage, and regret. 3 shadows that would cling to Robert Wagner for the rest of his days. In the immediate aftermath of Natalie Wood's death, the official investigation began, and investigators seemed to work quickly, piecing together a narrative that felt tidy, convenient, and, most importantly for a major star, free of scandal. According to Wagner's account, after the explosive argument, Natalie had simply gone to her stateroom. He claimed that later that night, she must have been bothered by the sound of the dinghy bumping against the yacht's hull and tried to secure it herself, had slipped and plunged into the ink-black water after hearing the dinghy knocking against the hull. It was a narrative that felt, at first, believable, plausible enough to quiet the press and silence the growing chorus of questions. But as the first pieces of evidence emerged from the shadows, that official story began to unravel. Hours later, the small rubber dinghy, the Times Valiant Asterisk, was discovered adrift, a ghost on the water, its engine cold and silent. The key was still turned in the ignition, the oars securely fastened. It bore no signs of a desperate attempt to board. A question began to form in the minds of the investigators. If Natalie's goal was truly to secure the dinghy, why were the oars still bound? Why hadn't she turned the motor? And perhaps most chillingly, why was the dinghy's light switch still in the off position? There were no scuff marks, no footprints, no trace that she had ever set foot inside. And then, the autopsy report arrived, pulling the mystery into far deeper, darker waters. Her blood alcohol level was measured at 0.14%. In her system, a cocktail of motion sickness, medication, and painkillers. A combination that would have left her disoriented, unsteady on her feet, dangerously vulnerable. But it was not the chemicals that told the most disturbing part of the story. It was the fresh bruises that marred her skin. A constellation of dark marks on her arms, her knees, her face, silent testimony to a possible struggle. A 2013 update from the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office would later conclude these injuries were likely sustained times before times she ever hit the water. A finding that shattered the theory of a simple, accidental fall. And then, voices from the darkness emerged witnesses, Marilyn Wayne and John Payne, anchored on a yacht nearby. They reported hearing a woman's desperate cries carrying across the water just after 11 p.m. Cries of "Help me! Someone please help me!" that went on for nearly 15 agonizing minutes. Wayne would later recall the sound of that voice, describing it as utterly terrified, a plea from the edge of oblivion. Then, a man's voice, strangely calm, slightly slurred, cut through the night. "Okay, honey, we're coming to get you." A promise made, but a promise that was never kept. The cries for help were answered only by an unnerving silence. And in the years that followed, Robert Wagner's own story began to shift, its details changing like the tide. In 1981, he told investigators that Natalie had simply vanished. In subsequent interviews, the story evolved she had gone to secure the dinghy. By his 2008 memoir, Pieces of My Heart Asterisk, he was adamant it was nothing more than a tragic accident. But as Lieutenant John Corina of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department noted in 2018, he's constantly changed his story a little bit, and his version of events just doesn't add up. By 2012, the official record itself was forced to change. Natalie's death certificate was amended to read, "Drowning and other undetermined factors." Detectives officially named Wagner a person of interest, conceding that his timeline of the night was simply not credible. But without definitive physical evidence, without a witness to the final moments, formal charges remained out of reach. The case was suspended in a legal purgatory, a haunting space caught between suspicion and sorrow. For the investigators, the truth was a phantom. For Robert Wagner, it became a shadow that would follow him for the rest of his life. The kind of shadow that no press release, no denial, no carefully worded memoir could ever fully escape. And then, there was Lana Wood's crusade for the truth. As Robert Wagner retreated from the glare of public inquiry, one voice refused to be silenced: Lana Wood, Natalie's younger sister. For Lana, the official narrative was an elaborate fiction. "My sister was terrified of the water," she would repeat in interview after interview. She would never, ever have gone near that dinghy alone, especially not in just her nightgown. In her 2021 memoir, Little Sister, My Investigation into the Mysterious Death of Natalie Wood, Lana laid the blame squarely at Wagner's feet, alleging a jealous rage that spiraled into tragedy. She claimed the yacht's captain, Dennis Davern, had confessed to her that his original statements were a lie, told under pressure to protect Wagner. According to Lana's account, Davern admitted he heard a furious argument, a loud, violent sound, and then Wagner's chilling command, "Don't turn on the lights, don't call for help." Her explosive claims fractured the Hollywood community. To some, she was a tireless warrior for justice. To others, a grieving sister, lost in a sea of suspicion. chasing ghosts. But Lana's unwavering resolve was a force of nature, compelling the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department to once again open the cold, dusty files of the case. Then, in the year 2011, the past began to speak. New voices emerged from the shadows, and long-dormant memories stirred. A fisherman, a mere 17 years old on that fateful night, broke his decades-long silence. He recalled the chilling sound of a woman's cries, lost to the wind and waves. And from another corner of the past, an acquaintance painted a darker portrait, speaking of Wagner's volatile temper in the swinging 1960s. Each new revelation wove another layer into the tapestry of doubt, and yet, prosecutors never pressed charges. Finally, in 2022, an official declaration echoed from the halls of law enforcement. Wagner, they announced, was cleared of any direct hand in the tragedy, even as the case itself was sealed away, forever labeled unsolved. The official statement read like an epitaph. All leads in the Natalie Wood case have been exhausted. For Lana, these were not words of closure. They were the hollow sound of betrayal. Her question hung in the air, heavy with grief and suspicion. If he truly loved my sister, why has he stayed silent? To this very day, Lana holds to the conviction that Wagner possesses a truth he has never shared. A truth he has kept locked away. He was the last person with her, she would say, her voice heavy with meaning, and that silence is the loudest sound of all. The public, the press, and the man at the center of the storm, haunted by a ghost of rumor. In the wake of Natalie's death, the immaculate world Robert Wagner had so carefully constructed came crashing down, seemingly overnight. For decades, he was the very personification of Hollywood class, a debonair figure who glided with effortless charm from the small screen's glow into the silver screen's grandeur. But then came the moment Natalie's body was recovered from the cold, dark waters off Catalina Island. And in that instant, the image shattered into a million pieces. The tragedy did not merely steal his wife, it stole the very essence of who he was. A hungry public demanded answers. A ravenous press smelled blood in the water. Tabloid headlines screamed, plastering his handsome face next to ugly words: murder, cover-up, jealous rage. Every microphone thrust in his direction, every reporter's call, carried the same unspoken, damning question: did you do it? The man who had once commanded the camera's gaze now recoiled from it. Wagner became a phantom, canceling appearances, declining all interviews, and retreating from the relentless, churning wheel of Hollywood gossip. Those closest to him whispered that he had become a ghost in his own life, a polite specter in public, but utterly hollow behind closed doors. For years, there was only silence. Then, in 2008, the silence was finally broken with the release of his memoir, Pieces of My Heart. It read less like a defense and more like a eulogy written in slow motion. Not a single day passes, he wrote, that I do not think of Natalie. I loved her with every piece of my being, and losing her was the singular, darkest moment of my life. But the public, long fed on suspicion, was a house divided. Some saw a portrait of a heartbroken husband, at last confronting his immeasurable pain. Others saw the careful brushstrokes of a man attempting to repaint history. In the years that followed, the ghosts of the past would not rest. The case was reopened, and the headlines returned, clawing their way back onto the front pages to haunt him once more. The talk show circuit buzzed with speculation, the tabloids unearthed inconsistencies, and in a stunning turn, even officials from law enforcement publicly branded his account of that night as incomplete. Through it all, Wagner held his tongue, refusing any new interviews. His silence, a shield he hoped would protect him, instead became a prism, magnifying the shadows of suspicion. And then, in the year 2020, a new voice entered the fray, a voice from the next generation, carrying the weight of both their names. His daughter, Natasha Gregson Wagner. With her documentary, Natalie Wood, What Remains Behind, she bravely stepped directly into the heart of the storm her father had weathered from a distance for decades. It is nothing short of outrageous, she declared, that this narrative was ever constructed around my father. He adored my mother. He would have laid down his life for her. Natasha was just 11 years old when the world went dark, her final memory a fragile, precious moment, an embrace with her mother just before that final voyage. She could still feel the impossible softness of Natalie's Angora sweater, a memory recounted through a veil of tears. I told her, she whispered, don't go. But a daughter's love, however powerful, could not quiet every voice. Natalie's own sister, Lana Wood, remained relentless, her public accusations against Wagner continuing unabated, fueling a bitter family schism that casts a shadow to this day. Between the searing accusations and the heartfelt defenses, one truth remained clear, whether for a man wronged by fate or a man hiding from it. For Robert Wagner, every day since that fateful night has been a study in absence, a life lived under the crushing weight of what was lost. The true sentence was never handed down in a courtroom. It was the suffocating silence that descended in the aftermath, the long, quiet years leading to a final, whispered reckoning. By the year 2025, Robert Wagner had become a 95-year-old specter, a man physically frail, his voice a low murmur, his eyes reflecting a past that clung to him like a shroud. While his body had begun to fail, his mind remained a cruel, perfect projector, replaying the events of that night in an endless, looping reel he could never shut off. When he finally broke his long silence for a recorded interview, his voice was a fragile thing, cracking under the strain of decades. "They call me a monster," he whispered, "a liar, a coward." A pause, thick with unspoken history. "But the truth, it's much simpler. I was a man in love who made mistakes, and I have paid for them every single day since." It wasn't the confession the world demanded, nor was it a declaration of innocence. His words existed in that murky twilight between guilt and grief, a gray space where the hard edges of truth are worn smooth by the tides of memory and time. He no longer sounded like a man fighting for his reputation. He sounded like a man who had long ago accepted his verdict, one delivered not by a jury, but by his own conscience. When the inevitable question was posed, what happened on that night in November 1981, Wagner's hesitation filled the room. Then, a voice barely audible, after the argument with Chris, "I went to find Natalie, and she was gone." He spoke as if reliving the moment. "I thought she just needed some time alone. I should have gone right after her. Maybe she'd still be here." He paused, his eyes glistening, the dam of composure finally breaking. "I was the last man with her. I can't deny that." That phrase, "the last man with her," became a recurring mantra in his final years. For him, it was more than a fact. It was an epitaph. It was his curse. Those who visited him in his seclusion noted a profound change. The glittering tales of Hollywood were gone, replaced by conversations that always, inevitably, circled back to her, to Natalie, and he had made a solemn vow to himself. He would never again live near the ocean. The rhythmic crash of waves, once a source of solace, had transformed into an unbearable reminder. He retreated inland, surrounded by family photos, ghosts of a life that was. His daughter Courtney painted a picture of days steeped in a quiet, heavy sorrow. Every time his eyes landed on a photo of Mom, she recalled, a silence would fall over him. You could physically feel the grief fill the room. It never, ever left him. To the world outside, he remained the charismatic star of Heart to Heart, a man whose smile was perfected for the camera's lens. But beyond the public gaze, he was a man fractured by love and loss, haunted less by public opinion and more by the one memory he could never outrun. Even at 95, the distant ocean still called to him, not with an invitation of peace, but with the chilling echoes of a night that refused to release its grip. In private notes, later revealed by Natasha, Wagner confessed, "She was my compass, my true north. When she died, I lost all bearing, all sense of where I was going." He was granted a long life, but it was a life shadowed by the unexplainable, the sound of the water, the abyss of those missing hours, and the one name his lips would never cease to whisper, Natalie. After 43 years, the truth of what happened to Natalie Wood remains adrift, caught in the currents between memory and enduring mystery. Robert Wagner's final words offered no clear answers, only the profound weight of a regret so heavy that no amount of evidence could ever prove it, and no passage of time could ever erase it. Was it a tragic misstep, a flash of uncontrollable anger, or something far more complicated, lost in the space between? Only two souls held the complete truth of that night, and one of them was silenced by the cold, dark water. The question, then, is left to us. What do you believe? Was Natalie's death a devastating accident, or the final, tragic act in a story of jealous rage? The story is now yours to consider. Let us know your thoughts in the space below. And if these echoes of the past have moved you, please like and subscribe. And stay with us as we continue to journey into the shadows, uncovering the truths